welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. This is the second Spotlight episode we've got for you today, and today we are focusing on presence detection in home automation. And with me today is Rohan. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So today we're going to break down presence detection, and we thought we would do a little bit of mix and match. We're going to talk about how Rohan and I have personally used presence detection in our homes, and also some other options that you can use to do presence detection. First of all, we'll start off with what actually is presence detection. Maybe you're just starting out with Home Assistant and home automation in general, and you're hearing people talking about presence detection. So presence detection is a way for your home to know when you are home.
A lot of times this becomes important because now you want to figure out, what can I do based on whether I'm home or not?
Exactly. And it doesn't necessarily have to be when someone's home. It could be who is home as well. Perhaps you want to have the thermostat at a particular level when you're home, and then when everyone else is home, it needs to be at a different level to make it so there's less arguments in the house, let's say.
I mean, hopefully that not, but yeah. Exactly, right? And a lot of times it's also, okay, you know what, one person's home, you know what, maybe I never go into one part of the house, right? And great, let me maybe turn off some lights there or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just turn off the office if no one that's going to be in the office is home, for example.
Exactly. So there's a lot of advantages to it, and a lot of people have interesting use cases behind it too. I also know people that use presence detection to say, hey, you weren't home, and now all of a sudden it's switched to home, so let me open up the garage door, and then because now that means you're coming home, and so on and so forth. So
exactly.
So there's some really cool things you can do based on the house knowing whether you're home or not.
Now, just because there's a lot of talk about presence detection and a lot of cool things you can do with presence detection, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy or necessarily accurate to do. There's a whole bunch of types of presence detection that you can do with varying pros and cons and success rates that you can have. Some you can get really basic presence detection, and most of it is based on a smartphone, which we'll delve into in a minute. And then there's other types as well, other sensors and devices that you can either stick on you, carry with you, or use to detect who's at home.
A lot of times when you're doing this as well, one of the big problems is, what do I choose? How far do I go with this? Where do I draw the line? Either A, how much is too much, or B, what's usable for me, right? So in terms of how much information am I providing the system, and then what do I really need to make an intelligent decision to try and do what I want to do, right? Because one of the things is you can go so overboard with this, and, and some people have a use case for that, and that's great. And some people, hey, I just need the house to know, is Rohan home or is Rohan not home, right? And that's it.
It also, if you go too far down this path, you can get to a point where you have so much automated and relying on that presence detection that you really need to decide what happens when things don't go right. For example, if you decide to hook up a siren and create your own little home security system, if you're out a bit longer at the office, maybe you've had a few phone calls that you wouldn't normally necessarily take, and your phone battery has died on the way home, and you get home, if your phone is dead and your house can't see your phone on, you may end up setting off your alarm system and waking up a few neighbors because your battery's dead.
And for a lot of people, that's actually a pretty decent reality as opposed to not. So one of the other things also is you can start going into, hey, again, presence can also mean, am I home? What room am I in? Or am I in a specific spot? So we start seeing a lot of these smart beds and smart sensors in beds, rather. Say, hey, am I in the bed or am I not in the bed or something like that, right? So
exactly, yeah.
I think a couple of people we've had on the show actually in the past are talking about how they trigger different sleep automations, or like, hey, goodnight automations or something like that, to say, okay, you know what, let's say I'm in my bed and maybe my partner's in my bed, then great, based on this, let's make an intelligent decision of everybody's in bed and therefore turn off all the lights or whatever, right?
Exactly. So there's a lot you can do with presence, and maybe sometimes you want to go to that level, you don't want to go to that level. My tip would be to always have a manual override somehow.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned the hard way. just in case. So first of all, let's start breaking down the types of presence detection. And I think what everyone's going to find, especially if you're first starting out with Home Assistant, one of the cool features Home Assistant has is the map. It's on the homepage of Home Assistant. You can track where people are on a map, and Home Assistant can use that to decide how the house is to act. This is generally done with your smartphone, so either an iOS or Android device, and it uses the GPS chip in your phone to detect where it is in the world.
Yeah.
There's a few apps that you can use for this. There is OwnTracks, which is a very popular one. It keeps your data in an MQTT broker or Mosquito broker. We've talked about that on a few episodes previously, and then it uses that to push to Home Assistant to know where you are based on the GPS coordinates. There's also a couple of other paid and free apps depending on the brand of phone you have, and you can also integrate now with the iCloud component and Google Maps, so you don't necessarily have to install anything extra on your phone to detect where you are.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to all of these, right? So one of the things I would say is figure out how these technologies actually work, and then you learn that, hey, one might work well, one might not for you. Just from a personal experience perspective, the iCloud one, so I have an iPhone, so one of the things I realized is the way the iCloud works is it basically goes in, logs into the iCloud system for you, and then says, hey, the where's my iPhone feature, and it says, where's my phone, and basically pulls that every 1 minute, 5 minute. I believe you can set the interval there. And what I realized is that is draining my battery super quickly.
Right, so it actually records. So the Apple service will actually physically dial that to your phone to detect where you are.
Correct. Yeah. So
right.
Again, for me personally, so I was using that for a couple of weeks, and then I was just like, man, why is my phone always dying all of a sudden? Turns out it's just because I was doing it too frequently too, right? So there's especially with these kind of apps, there's also a balance of how often is too often, and then is that often enough for what you're trying to do?
Yeah, and I guess that's where a lot of all the other technologies as well that we'll discuss in a minute come into it, because if your phone's scanning every 5 minutes, for example, it may take up to 5 minutes for your home to realize that you're actually at home. Mm-hmm. So you could be walking around your house for 5 minutes and the lights won't turn on because your Home Assistant or your home automation system doesn't know you're home until it's waited that 5 minutes to find out where you are.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to the garage door use case I used earlier, let's say you're trying to come in to park your car in the garage, and you've pulled up to your driveway, and it's just then that you broke your geofence. Well, guess what? You're waiting 5 more minutes until you can actually pull your car inside the garage, unless you press a button or whatever and go in.
Then that defeats the purpose of having an awesome smart home, right?
Right. And then at that point, is it easier to push a button, or do I want to code all of these things and, bring the automation into Home Assistant or wherever? So again, there's that fine line that you kind of have to figure out for yourself. Like I said, how often is too often, and then how often is minimum, right? So you got to figure out those bounds.
One unique thing I found with GPS, so when I first started with Home Assistant, that was the first thing I went to. It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about, oh, you got to get GPS. It's awesome. And admittedly, it looked really cool on the map. I could see where both my wife and I were on the map, and it worked out well. But then it sort of got to a point where you would explain, how cool is this to my friends? And it sort of got a bit creepy with, so you can track where you both are at anywhere in the world at any time? Like, do you really want to go to that level? And I mean, fair enough, to us, that's fine. We're comfortable, we trust both each other, but looking outside in, it can look a bit, controlling. And so some people that aren't necessarily into home automation and understand how the technology works, it can definitely be used for evil as well. And a lot of people will look at it as an evil thing as opposed to a feature.
No, for sure. And I mean, this is something where everybody you track, you probably should have a conversation with them to say,
yes, absolutely.
Hey, by the way, the house knows when you're home or not, and I can also see that information to see where you are.
Yeah.
Now, I know there are a lot of couples that have a lot of the couples apps and stuff like that. That's like, like private chat and like shopping lists and where are you, right? So there's that. So I mean, I don't see it being a huge problem, but it is something you do want to. There are certain points of privacy there as well, and again, a lot of systems like OwnTracks and such, they are hosted somewhere, right? Actually, I'm not sure about OwnTracks, but iCloud for sure is hosted with Apple. 98% of the people probably realize that their phone is logging GPS data and stuff, and or can be passing it back, but now there's also okay, well, does Apple know where I am all the time as opposed to when I click, hey, where's my iPhone, right? But Apple, the phones also do check in back home.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, if you're very privacy minded and you decide that you're not okay with that, and which is completely acceptable, and at that point, then you kind of have to figure out, okay, is using a phone right for me?
Now, if you do decide that you want that GPS tracking in your Home Assistant, one of the most battery efficient components would be Google Maps. Google Maps, at least for Android, will automatically update your location, assuming that you've opted into Google Location Services, which you most likely have. And when you use the Google Maps component with Home Assistant, unlike the iCloud component, it won't actually ping your phone for your location. It will just ask the Google servers to where you last were detected.
Yeah, which is a great method.
Yeah, exactly. There's also OwnTracks, which publishes to the MQTT broker. You will need to adjust settings a little bit on iOS devices, but once again, it can drain the battery, so watch out for that one.
Yeah, that's actually been one personally that I haven't played with, but I've kind of wanted to look at just as I move my stuff, trying to move my stuff off of my current Zigbee Z-Wave network, right? And especially on my phone to say, okay, you know what, can I eliminate some apps and then replace them with a couple of other apps, or do I have it pretty efficient now? So
OwnTracks has a feature you can use to, they use iBeacons. So you can set up an iBeacon, which is a little, I believe it's Bluetooth, but it's an iBeacon, so it could use some Apple proprietary protocol. And you could leave that in your home. And when your iPhone gets home and it sees that beacon in your home, OwnTracks can use that beacon to say, okay, I know I'm at home, shut down the GPS. While I can see this beacon, I'm just going to tell OwnTracks that I'm at home. So there's another option. Okay. Yeah. So if you're using OwnTracks and an iPhone, I believe it might also be available for Android. It's been a while since I've used OwnTracks, but there is that option as well. If you're finding your battery level on OwnTracks is getting a little bit hammered, check out iBeacons and see if you can use one of those.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, I guess on Android it wouldn't use specifically iBeacons, but it'd use some other BLE.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the ones I use as well. So in place of OwnTracks or iCloud and such. So when I started home automation, I actually started with SmartThings, and the app actually has a pretty decent geofencing system based on GPS location. And at least from what I've found, it's maybe, it is obviously taking a hit on your battery. It's just how much of a hit is it taking? And to me, there's no visible usage, right? And when I check my battery app and all this stuff on my iPhone, it's not even listed on there. So to me, it works pretty well, and the nice thing is I don't have to. One of the side effects of using your phone as a GPS is you don't have to change the batteries out and stuff. I mean, assuming you normally charge your phone anyways. I know I do. I need it for work and such, so it's pretty decent. So I was actually very, very impressed at how efficient that would be. Because at first I was kind of skeptical, going, "Oh man, this is going to drain all my battery and such."
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so, but you know what? It tells the app, hey, where are you, blah, blah, blah. And then based on that, it passes that information off to Home Assistant with, so it actually does my geofencing and says, I have my address put in there. And based on that, it says, yep, are you home? Are you not home? And then based on that, it'll basically, for me right now, how I have it is it runs across MQTT and passes that information to Home Assistant to say, hey, yes, Rohan is home.
So for the SmartThings, you would have a SmartThings hub at home, I assume?
Yeah, so I do have a SmartThings hub at home. I don't think it requires that hub though to do the whole GPS tracking bit, right? Just because again, that is between the app and the cloud,
Right.
but that's between the phone and the cloud, and then. But yeah, I do have that information. I do have a hub, and from what I understand, it's processed via the hub, right? So the hub does a bit of processing, but I don't think it's actually necessarily reliant on it.
Uh-huh.
At least in my home, it's basically the hub is just a radio.
Right. And would you then have so you're obviously using a third-party library that does the smart things to MQTT. Does that use the hub or does that use the SmartThings API from the cloud?
Yeah, so it actually leverages the API in the cloud. So it's the Smarter SmartThings plugin. Just search Smarter SmartThings Home Assistant on Google, and it should be the first link. So a while ago, they had a blog post about this, and so on and so forth. So it uses a combination of both, but I believe it is primarily just based on the API in the cloud. And what it does is it takes that and dumps it down to your local MQTT. So for me, I have them running in a couple of Docker containers. So there's basically my MQTT broker, and then there's another container that basically says, okay, Cloud API, talk to MQTT broker, right? And then on there you basically select, hey, I wanna follow these components into MQTT, and here's my topic, and go. And it's super straightforward. It was, I will admit, it's straightforward once you start using it. Setting it up did take a couple of attempts. I mean, it might have just been one of those days where I was just, super tired and burnt out and trying, but I don't know. But it did take me a couple of attempts, but just, browsing through the forums and such, I wasn't the only person that struggled with it, but once you get it set up, it's basically don't touch it, right? I say that as my system is kind of ish broken as I moved MQTT servers, but yeah, until you're doing something like that, it's perfectly fine. Get it set up once and then don't touch it.
So in your home, if you're using SmartThings as on your phone, how long would it take on average for Home Assistant to detect that you've arrived home? Would it be instant? Have you ever noticed a delay?
There's a bit of a delay, not a ton though. I want to say it's like probably about a minute, maybe.
Okay.
At its worst, right? And at least as far as I've noticed it. And then that's the thing, right? Because I don't know when the poll interval is, and I don't know when I don't know when the app polls and sends it up. I'm sure it's documented somewhere. I haven't looked. But at least from what I've noticed, it's more or less pretty instant. But I do have other techniques that I'm using as well, right? So I'm not only monitoring my phone, and I was for a while, mostly because I ordered batteries and it turns out it wasn't on Prime, and it was a horrible time. For one of my physical fobs, and so I basically turned it off because my house always was like, nope, he's not home. And I was like, oh. And again, this is one of the downsides, right? So, but no, it works pretty well. I mean, I don't think I've had to wait more than a couple of minutes ever. And maybe I've just gotten lucky and I just never hit that point where, maybe it is a 5 minute and I came in at the 1.5 minute mark every time or something. Yeah. So, I mean, but it hasn't degraded my experience any. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Right. So, but you mentioned you used to use OwnTracks. What's your method now?
I found the GPS on the phone to be a bit too slow. Plus, I have, as I mentioned, my wife has an iPhone, and it's a bit difficult it was draining her battery like crazy, using the intervals for all that. So now we just use Wi-Fi on our phones. So I have an ASUS router. Mm-hmm. And if you go onto the Home Assistant components page, and look under presence detection, there are a whole bunch of brands of routers or modems where your Wi-Fi access points, whatever your country likes to call them. Mm-hmm. And what Home Assistant does is it logs in to my ASUS router and detects what devices are connected to the Wi-Fi at that time. So when I get home, my phone always has its Wi-Fi on, and as soon as it joins the network, to be honest, I park my car out on the street and my phone can connect to the Wi-Fi. Before I even get inside, I can see lights turning on inside. So yeah, pretty much instant.
Oh, that's cool. So let me ask you this then. Have you ever tested to see, hey, how far is too far? Like from a range perspective. So obviously your wireless, especially at 2.4, kind of radiates out far enough. Do you find that it's too far, or do you find that you don't really care?
Well, I guess that comes down to the type of home you have. So I'm now in a house. Previously, I was in a apartment block, and I could actually, when I was in the apartment, I would be able to, I was on the third level, for example, and on the ground, my Wi-Fi would still connect. So before I could actually look up 3 levels and see my lights turning on because it thought I was home when, I could have been at a neighbor's house, or just checking the mail and driving past. So yeah, I think it really depends on the size of home you have. And this is what it comes down to, right? Everyone's home's different. So Wi-Fi works for me. The Wi-Fi gets a bit patchy out on the street where my car is, so it's probably at the right distance for me. Whereas Bluetooth is much shorter, so that's not going to work for me now. But when I was in the apartment, I did use Bluetooth, and the Bluetooth range was perfect for that 2-bedroom apartment. Wherever I was in that apartment, I think maybe there was a corner in the closet or the bathroom that was right at the other end of the apartment where the Bluetooth signal couldn't be detected.
Right.
And the way Bluetooth works is, so when you have your Wi-Fi, you connect to the network. For Bluetooth, if you have Bluetooth on your phone, it will actually admit your MAC address for Bluetooth. So you don't necessarily even have to pair your phone to anything. So as I would walk in, my phone's Bluetooth would be on. It wouldn't connect to anything, but Home Assistant would scan I think I set it to 30 seconds for all Bluetooth devices that it could see. And, within 30 seconds, I would get up to the 3rd level where my apartment is, walk in through the door, and Bob's your uncle. I'm home. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting then. So there is a level of for you at least, it makes sense, right? Like, because one of the things initially when I thought about doing Wi-Fi is I was like, what if I'm at the neighbor's house? Like just, grabbing a beer or something like that with the neighbor.
Yep.
Do I want the house to think I'm home? And do I want it to think I'm home? B, am I overthinking this? Right? Like,
well, but that's also the same problem I had with GPS. Because I wanted to save battery, I set up a zone for my home, and then I had the zone as small as I possibly could, but I was close enough to the zone for home if I was out on the street. Like I could be 5 blocks away at a cafe or something near my home.
Yeah.
But the GPS signal would all put me in the home zone. So I would be sitting out having a coffee somewhere, and my home's, playing music and thinking I'm home by myself because technically I was in that GPS zone. So yeah, I think it doesn't matter what. It's not necessarily related to Wi-Fi. It could be GPS as well that would have that same issue.
Yeah. Well, and the question is also one of the things you got to remember is dealing with boundaries, right? Like, so what if I'm right on the cusp of where, especially with Wi-Fi and such, and it's the same case with GPS as well, especially if you live in a metropolitan area. Like in my case example, I don't live downtown Toronto, but when my office is in downtown Toronto, and even trying to navigate using Waze or something recalculates like 16 times because of all the reflection from all the tall buildings and such, right? So, and then how do you deal with, okay, you're home, you're not, you're home, you're not, like, let's say 10 times within a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can be marked as away, not home, all that very quickly.
Well, and then that means, maybe all your lights turn on and all your lights turn off and all your lights turn on again, right? every, whatever interval, 5 minutes or 1 minute or what have you. It might be a good idea to get a couple of different, both near field and far field, right? So GPS plus Wi-Fi plus maybe something else as well then.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, my Wi-Fi is connected through my router, but if your brand of router isn't available, there's a couple of other sensors that you can use to detect devices on your network. One is Nmap, which will basically send out packets across your network and find out which devices are connected.
Yeah.
Another one is the basic. It's basic to me, but because I've been doing it since I was a kid, one of the first things you learn when you get into a command prompt is how to ping other devices, and that's a great way. If you always know that your iPhone or phone is going to have the same IP address on your local network, you can just set up Home Assistant to ping it every minute or 30 seconds, whatever you decide. And once it gets a response to that ping, Home Assistant will know that your device is connected to the network and you're home. So yeah, there's definitely some good options for Wi-Fi devices if you want to go down that route.
Yeah, the only thing I would caution with Nmap, and I believe this is actually even written in the components page when I looked at it a while ago, because I was like, oh, Nmap, that's kind of cool. You got to be careful about how often you're scanning.
That's right.
Just because Nmap does, so the point of Nmap, if you've never used it before, is normally it can be used for security tracking to say like, hey, let's say I have all of these ports open and so on and so forth on whatever device. Or it can be used to scan for, again, similar kind of use case, but to say, hey, all of these devices are up and running, right? But what that means is A, they need to keep their Wi-Fi on. The devices need their Wi-Fi to be on. And B is it can use battery just depending on how fast you're scanning. So
that's true. Yeah.
Just again, be cognizant of that. Whereas I really like the router method, because at this point it's either, hey, are you connected? Yeah, great. Okay. And I'm not pinging the phone. I'm not even interacting with my phone. It's the phone interacting as it normally would with my home's Wi-Fi, and me polling the router to see if my device is active. Similar to what you said about Google Maps, right? Where we ping the cloud to say, hey, where is this device right now? Rather than pinging the device to say, hey, where are you right now? So it's the same kind of delineation. So personally, I'm not doing it myself, but I do really prefer the router method over Nmap or ping.
I think the router is definitely the best option to go for if you can.
Yeah, and exactly. The other thing is with ping, and you kind of touched on it, Phil, is you now need to have a static IP address and such on the phone. To me, that I hate doing this just because it doesn't break a lot of things, but it can be a little bit annoying, right? So let's say you are a mobile worker or a remote worker, whatever you want to call it, and let's say you work out of Starbucks or a lot of different hotspot places, or maybe you're traveling often and you're going to the airport and hopping on the airport Wi-Fi. Well, guess what? Now every time you need to set it back to DHCP and then set it back to a static IP and so on and so forth. And one of the security methods a lot of people use in public Wi-Fi networks is to not allow static IP addresses. So meaning it has to be your device has to get a IP address through the wireless through the Wi-Fi, essentially, right?
I think the easiest way to get around that would be to assign an IP address at the router level if your router supports that. So you can basically tell your router, okay, if this MAC address logs in, always give it this IP address.
Yeah. So and then, but you also have to make sure your router does support that, right? In maybe lower end routers and such, they may not support it. And sometimes with service provider provided routers, just because those routers are typically basic, they may not support that either. So just be careful. Ideally, if you get a router, if you're in the market for a new router, have a look at the components page and maybe try and grab one of those that they already support, or consider writing your own integration for it.
So one of the problems, and it's a theme amongst all the presence detection devices, is the iOS versus Android. They all have different ways of communicating.
Yeah,
and Wi-Fi is no exception. And especially on iOS devices, in order to conserve battery iOS devices will go into a sleep mode and they may disconnect from your Wi-Fi network. They will reconnect every now and then to go out and see if there's any push notifications or iMessages that have come through. But during that time, if Home Assistant detects or can't see your iPhone or Android phone detected on the Wi-Fi network, Home Assistant may mark you as not home anymore and turn off all the lights if you've set up those automations.
Yeah.
One of the settings Home Assistant has introduced, and I believe it's available possibly across all device tracker presence detection components, is the Consider Home setting that allows you to say to Home Assistant, don't mark anyone away until they've been disconnected from the Wi-Fi for more than 10 minutes, for example. Right. So that way, if your phone connects every 5 minutes to check for updates, it needs to wait 10 minutes for you to no longer connect at all, for you to be marked as not home.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, right? Again, you're giving it some boundaries to avoid kind of the bounce between off, on, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then another thing, if you want to get really, really crazy with Bluetooth, you can go down and start tracking presence depending on what room you're in. There's a great little GitHub repository, a great little app called Room Assistant, which sends your presence, basically what room you're in your home, over Mosquitto/MQTT. And then you can decide, okay, if my phone is in the office, then turn on the office lights. Or if the phone moves into the bedroom, turn on the bedroom lights. It does require that you have either a Raspberry Pi or another computer running in each room that has Bluetooth enabled, so you can see, so those devices can scan for Bluetooth devices near them. So it can be a bit cumbersome to set up and get a bit expensive if you've only got one Raspberry Pi. But you can go to that level if you want to.
So now by doing this, so like you said, you kind of get your, hey, I'm in the office room, turn on the office lights, or I'm in the kitchen, turn on the kitchen lights kind of thing. Do you find that you use that a lot?
So I didn't bother going down this because I thought it requires you to have your phone all the time with you, right?
Yeah.
And once again, when you get home, like if your battery's, flat, you're gonna go put it on the charger that might be in the kitchen or in the bedroom, and then you're gonna walk away. So for me, in-room presence detection is all done through motion sensors. I don't want to be having to carry a beacon or a phone with me. I may not have it on me, so I'd rather be able to just walk into a room and the lights come on based on a motion sensor in the room that's designed to detect that.
Yeah, and or an actual physical, like an occupancy sensor or something similar, right? So
yeah,
so it's interesting because in room automations are one of those things that I've kind of toyed with, and I was like, do I care that much about a specific room? Because now, from a power saving perspective, LED is really efficient. Do I care if all of my lights are on as opposed to a couple of my lights, right? Or something similar?
I really loved Stargate growing up as a kid, and I always loved Stargate Atlantis when they would go through the Stargate and all the lights would turn on as they moved around. And I've sort of emulated that with Home Assistant. So I have Z-Wave motion sensors all over the house. And I have one sitting on my desk here at the office. And as soon as I walk into a room, like the bedroom or the kitchen, the lights just turn on. I have a hallway in my house, and I have 2 motion sensors at either end of the hallway. And depending on which motion sensor gets tripped first, will determine the order of the lights that come on. So if the one closest to you gets tripped, it will turn the lights on and sort of follow you down the hallway slowly, sort of to give you that nice little, the lights are following you.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's a whole other level of nerdy right there. But
yeah, it totally is. But it's one of my that's my go-to thing. Right, and it's also nice that once the TV turns off and we go to sleep, and eventually the motion sensors detect, okay, no one's in this room anymore. Shut all the lights off and go to sleep. I think if you're going to do presence detection, I think motion sensors. And a combination of other things, which we can probably do in another episode, would be best.
Yeah, and this is definitely, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, right? It's one of those things where we kind of need a couple of things to kind of get really what we want, but then there's also a line of too much.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you use any BLE devices as well? So you mentioned Bluetooth for kind of the room ish, and Bluetooth and BLE a lot of times are used interchangeably, right? But
Yeah.
BLE being Bluetooth Low Energy.
A low energy device could be anything from like an Apple Watch or even a smartwatch. I actually have a Moto 360 smartwatch on my wrist. But I've found that the LE tracking, I don't think it's ever detected my watch unless it's been in pairing mode, so I haven't bothered with that. And the other option that you can use that Bluetooth LE tracking really comes to light is for those little smart tile trackers. I think there's one called Tile that you can buy.
Yeah.
They basically are, I think they've got maybe you can't, I don't even think you can replace the battery in them, but they're a sealed little unit. They're basically, I think they came out from a Kickstarter, and they're designed, you put them on like your bike or your backpack, and they just emit a low Bluetooth frequency, and then based on that, you would have an app on your phone, and that app would then detect, okay, I can see this tile, here's its unique ID. I'll use the app to update its location through the app. I think Bluetooth scanners can also pick up those tiles and other little presence detection things. Once again, it's carrying something on me for presence detection. Maybe it would be cool to put it in like my briefcase or something like that. So that could be another form of Home Assistant to know, okay, the briefcase is at home. That means Phil might be home, sort of thing. But so far, I don't like the idea of having an app in my phone to have to do it, right?
Yeah, it's so BLE is also one of those things where again you can use. So I actually use one similar to the tile called Tracker,
right?
Without the E, so it's TRACKR. So Tracker does work very similarly. For me, again, I picked this one over the tile because it was on sale, so why not? And I think there was like a 5-pack on sale for like $80 or something. So it was like $20 each, as opposed to where normally it's a lot. I believe it is a lot more expensive, and and I can change the batteries and such. But same kind of concept, right? Where essentially my phone tracks the beacon from the actual fob there, from the Tracker fob, and updates the Tracker cloud service as to where it last saw my device. So I have one in my backpack, like or in my laptop bag. I have one in my all my keys. I actually have one in my car just because I was playing around with it, and I was like, okay, you know what, why not? I have a couple of others lying around too, and so essentially what that translates to for me is now it also gives me another point of that. Okay, you know what? Are you home? Are you not home? So on and so forth. I found that it's kind of there are a couple of reliances on it. Like now I have 2 things that can go wrong rather than one.
Yeah.
Right. With the phone, it's okay, great. My phone can go wrong, or like my battery can die, whatever. With this, great. Now I got to A, change the batteries on this, and B, I got to make sure that that connection between my phone and that exists. So, which isn't, again, I'm making it out to be a bigger problem than it is, but it is still something to consider, right? When you're looking at this. But to me, it's another extra point of thing. And the nice side effect that it has is if I can't find something, it'll, like I know I left my keys in the house. Oh, where did I leave it? Is it on the dresser? Is it on, on my key hook or in the office or something like that? Or, did I accidentally put it in like the freezer or something? I've never actually done that, but it happens. And you can basically, if it is somewhere close to you, you can trigger it to make like a sound, right? Or a chime. And
nice.
And that way you can help find it, and vice versa. It also has phone tracking, and I actually have it mixed in with my Echo, so I can say, "Hey Echo, where's my phone?" or something like that, and basically it'll go log into Tracker, and then it'll send a chime on my phone.
So does that work with iPhone?
It does, yeah. I have again, I don't have an Android device, so I haven't tried it with the Android, or I don't have an Android phone. I haven't tried it with the Android, so. But outside of that, I mean, it works decent. I had a couple of couple of problems with it. I actually had a problem. Well, I have a problem right now with it where, again, it kind of lost connectivity between the app and the device. So I just need to kind of repair them. But as long as you realize that, that's fine. Not a huge issue.
Can those tracker devices work without your phone? Like, does your phone? Because what happens if you don't open the tracker app? Does that mean that you won't have an update of where those devices are in the world?
Yeah. So let's say I go on vacation. So I live in Toronto right now, and let's say I came to visit you, and I left my keys at your place in Australia. So you know what? Well, fine. Now, how do I deal with this? So if anybody else has the tracker app installed or anything, the app will actually say, hey, you know what? Buddy walked by Phil's place and caught the beacon. So this is where it was last seen. So if you set it to, and I've actually noticed a while ago in the app where I walked by somebody's something. I don't even know what or where or anything like that. I walked by somebody's something. I guess it helped them find it just by virtue of me walking near that area. Again, it's near field communication, right? So, oh, you know what? Maybe they dropped, maybe somebody has one in their wallet and they dropped their wallet somewhere and, in the bushes or something for whatever reason. And I walked by it and it caught it. And it's like, then they can go, oh, okay, it's in this area. Great. It was last seen 10 minutes ago. Okay, let me run there quick and go find it. So it's there. I mean, I don't know if I really answered it answer the question from the context you were asking it, in the sense of, it is still BLE, so I haven't played with this, but in theory, it should still be able to be picked up by something like Room Assistant or Happy Bubbles or something like that to say, where am I, like in the house as well, to say, oh, you know what, I saw this last in this room.
Do you find running the app would consume some of your battery? Because that seems a bit intensive to constantly be detecting, Bluetooth devices nearby and then saying, hey, I know that MAC address, I'm going to post that up to the server, all without you doing anything in the background.
Yeah, so it's not terrible, to be honest. And similar to the SmartThings app, I haven't really noticed it. So yeah, it does, obviously everything does take up battery, but I haven't noticed it. And it's not even in like the top 10 list or whatever in the battery app on iPhone. So it's, to me, that's good enough. Yeah, it's not a huge. So one of the things is Bluetooth isn't terribly taxing on the battery. It is, but it's not. It could be way worse. And I think modern phones are kind of tailored to cater to that as well, right? And from a BLE perspective, BLE is typically more passive, where I'm just listening once every whatever seconds or something like that to say, hey, are you here? Am I here? Am I here? Am I here? Right? And once you get that, then it's not too bad.
Okay, that's cool. You mentioned before that you have Zigbee trackers as well. What do you use for that?
Yeah, so as part of my initial buy of SmartThings, I actually bought some door sensors and such, but it also came with a presence sensor. And that presence sensor it's one of the SmartThings branded presence sensors, or I guess now it's Samsung branded. They call it an arrival sensor. It's, out of all of the presence detection methods I have, that's probably my favorite, as weird as it sounds. So one of the things so how it works is basically, so I actually have that one in my car as well, in my console. And, it passively, when I come in the house, it connects to the Zigbee network and says, hey, Rohan's home. Or, well, Rohan's car is home, which assumably I'm driving, hopefully. And if not, I might need to call somebody. And then based on that, it'll trigger my automations and such. And then, so that's actually my primary method of saying, hey, am I home or not? And right now, so it's actually a little bit sad. So I was replacing the battery the other day, and the little tab that holds the battery in actually snapped. And so now I'm trying to figure out, like, oh, I know. And it's it's a simple like CR2032, like a little watch cell battery, right? Yeah. That they use. And I'm like, oh man, like it sucks because I actually really like this device. And, So I'm kind of like, do I get ghetto and do I just tape it down, or what do I do? Um, so I'm still or do I just buy a new one, right? But unfortunately, they're not super cheap. I think when I
Yeah, I
looked
was
at
gonna.
it, so I have an older version, but it's like $60,
Oh,
right?
really?
60 Canadian dollars. I mean, in US dollars, it might be cheaper, but at least to buy it here, from what I've seen on Amazon and in a couple of other sites, it's in around 50 to $60. So it's like, that's kind of expensive for just having,
Mm,
hey, are you home or are you not home? And again, it doesn't do any geolocation. It doesn't do any of that stuff. It doesn't sync with the phone, which is actually why I really like it, because I mean, I have a charger in my car, but that charger also assumes that I remember to plug my phone in the car,
yeah, exactly.
and or that my phone doesn't die 2 minutes before I get home, or something like that, right? So so I do like having that as well, I was about to say a secondary, but it's really my primary method of, am I home or not? Now, I'm not doing any of the any room level stuff. Most of my automations are actually pretty simple, and hey, Rohan's home, great, turn on the lights. Rohan's not home, okay, don't turn on certain lights, right? And based on that, it's, to me, it works really, really well. And the thing is, as long as my MQTT broker is up, which it almost always is, it's a rock solid method to say to detect my presence, right?
Yeah.
Again, the only reliance being the battery. The battery's not too bad; it lasts several months, so it's
Okay, that's pretty
maybe
decent.
maybe twice a year I change it.
Yeah, especially for just a watch battery as well.
Yeah, so exactly, right? I mean, they are really passive. It's not
Mm.
doing a ton of stuff, so it should be pretty, straightforward in terms of, hey, I'm home, connect. Okay, I'm not, disconnect. And
Physically, how big is the device? Is it something that you could just tuck away in a pocket or in your briefcase or in your backpack?
yeah, so the one I have is I feel like I haven't seen the newer ones physically, but just seeing the picture on Amazon and such, it looks a touch bigger, but it's a little bigger than a coin.
Okay.
It's not too large. It's definitely something you could put in your pocket. It actually did come with a like a silicone ring that you can put, or like a rubber ring that you can kind of add it to your key ring and keep it with your keys, things like that. The tracker, to be honest, has a much thinner profile. This is probably, thickness wise, it's probably 2 or 3 coins thick. But you know what? It for its size, it works really well. Like I said, I have it in my car. I just stick it in my console and leave it there until the battery dies, and then I pull it out, change the battery, and put it back in, and off I go. Right. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it works amazing. Yeah, it's weird that it's sometimes it's just the simplicity of the things. Like, I just want crap to work, right? I don't want to have to think about, am I on Wi-Fi? Am I not on Wi-Fi? Is my Bluetooth on? Is my Bluetooth off? Etc. Just work.
It does one thing and it does it well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as far as things being very reliable, that to me, that is probably the most reliable one I've had, as long as I change the batteries.
How strong is the signal? Do you think it would? If it sits in your console, I assume it's strong enough to penetrate through the car windshield and all that, because your car's a big metal object. I assume it could get through that no problem.
Yeah. It's so the car obviously is outside the house, in the garage for me. It penetrates that fine, and again gets through the house as well. Now, I don't live in a house that's old enough to be built with proper concrete and this and that. It's more framing that they use here, and especially North America. Most houses are, most recent houses in the last, like, I don't know, 30, 40 years are mostly wood based. For me, that's no problem at all. Even when it's out in the driveway, it connects, and yeah, it penetrates to the car, to the house, and no worries. And that was actually one of my big concerns as well. Well, there's a giant motor, that might emit
Yeah,
RF interference, and then there's glass, there's metal, even in the house there's glass. How will it work? I've had no problems.
that's awesome. Well, I assume it's only works with smart things for the moment, though.
Um, Yeah, I mean, in theory, it's Zigbee, so it should work with everything. I have it connected to my SmartThings. Eventually, I do plan to move off of SmartThings, so when I do, I will let you know to see if it works.
Okay.
So one of the things I do want to try is moving all my Zigbee and Z-Wave stuff to a Raspberry Pi and then do that. So, but there's no reason it shouldn't work. Again, Zigbee is an open protocol, so
Yeah, I'm sure someone can reverse engineer it, so that would be good if they can.
yeah, and again, the logic is similar to kind of what you said about the router Wi-Fi method, right? Is it connected? Yes. Is it connected? No. So
Yeah.
there's no reason that it shouldn't work.
So there's some cool techniques for presence detection, and they're all basically like a physical device, either your phone or the Zigbee presence detection from SmartThings. So that's pretty cool. There's some other presence detection that you can use in Home Assistant as well. Actually, I think when I last checked, there was 47 presence detection devices alone in Home Assistant. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of options. One that I recently started using because of I had guests coming over and I needed a way for my automations to kick in to think that someone was home without me being there with my phone. I actually decided to use an MQTT alarm panel, and it was actually really good timing. Lovelace just came out, and I was able to use the Lovelace custom card for the alarm panel with a Fire HD tablet on one of the walls in the kitchen. So if someone comes home and my wife or my phones aren't on the network, maybe our batteries are flat, or as I mentioned, a guest has come over, they can actually go into the kitchen and the tablet will display an alarm panel, and they can enter a code. And when that alarm panel gets disarmed, it'll tell Home Assistant that, hey, someone is home.
Mm-hmm.
And then the automations can then kick in and say, okay, assume someone's home, away we go. That's a great way I found to do presence as well. It doesn't require phone batteries to be charged. You can give the code out to whoever you need it to be given to. You can even assign temporary codes to someone else. And yeah, and it doesn't have to be a tablet on a wall. I think there's a few alarm control panels that integrate with Home Assistant already. So if you're looking for something else to detect presence, actually, I believe Jared, who was a guest in one of our recent episodes, does something similar with a physical alarm panel for their presence detection. So that is a great idea if you need it as well.
Yeah, so it's really cool because now one of the things you can start doing is you can actually have a failsafe, right? And it sounds like kind of that's what you've done.
Yes, that is the total reasoning behind it. I need a failsafe in case, for whatever reason, the Bluetooth chip could be not scanning devices, or literally what's more common is our phone batteries have run out, and we don't want to open the door and the alarm goes off because our phones are not charged.
Yeah, and actually it's funny because it's as unlikely as it is. Naturally, it has happened to me where my Zigbee dongle's batteries died, my Tracker's battery has died, and I came home I was out of town that week, and then I came home and just my phone was, I think I left it on airplane mode accidentally or something like that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And I come in and I'm like, where are my lights? Right? And then I had to hey, tell my Echo, say turn on the lights and such, right? So but that's it though, right? And that's a great fail-safe method, especially if you're doing it for security. And like you said, you don't want an alarm to just start going off at 3 a.m. when you come home one night after the pub or something, and
exactly
waking up your neighborhood. One of the other interesting methods too, and we talked about this in one of the very first episodes, is tripwires. If you're not familiar, essentially that's having, let's say 2 beams or something like that you break when you walk across to say, hey, I'm here or I'm not. So if beam 1 is broken and then beam 2 is broken, then okay, great, I walked into the room. And then if it's 2 and a 1, great, I walked outside of the room.
Yeah, so I don't think there's an official integration with this for Home Assistant. So it is something you would have to code yourself. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a beginner level thing, but I believe a lot of retail stores use this to detect how many people are in their stores or how many shoppers have come for a day.
Yeah, so they use it for how many people have come in a day for the shop, or a lot of times even for fire code, like a building can only have, let's say, 200 people in it or 500 people in it. So that way they can actually retain a count of who is actively in the building just by adding it at all their entrance and then summing it up, right?
Yeah.
One of the other interesting things, and we were kind of chatting about this, is the Xandom system. And if you're not familiar with it, basically it almost does like the virtual tripwire using RF.
Yeah, this was a Kickstarter. It was really cool when when it first came out as a Kickstarter. I'm like, there's no way this is going to take off. This is going to be one of those Kickstarters that fails. It's not going to work. Like how it just seemed too far fetched of this technology. But sure enough, they've actually started shipping units, and yeah, basically it uses the water or the moisture in your body, and when you make a movement, it disrupts the RF signals in and around the home, and it will then put it on a map where you are in, or where that movement was in the home.
Which is very cool. So it's interesting because you're using a different characteristic of RF. So if you're not familiar with how RF or radio frequencies work, is basically any small thing can affect RF. That's why one day your wireless might be great at home, and the next day, you know, if it's a little humid or something like that, then, you know, based on all that stuff, you can get degraded quality or better quality sometimes, right? Sometimes it carries it further. So it's interesting because now they're starting to use a lot of these technologies to say, hey, how are people moving through a space?
That's right, yeah. Although I think the Xandom one does require you to be moving for it to detect. So if you're sitting on the couch watching TV, it's not going to know you're in the room because you're not making much movement.
Right. Well, it's essentially that same virtual tripwire, right?
Exactly.
Where, you know, if you don't break the tripwire, then you're not tripping anything.
And there's also other components you can use as well. So there's one of the air conditioning control units called Tado. They use the app on your phone to detect where you are, and the Home Assistant can actually use the Tado API to determine if your mobile phone is at home or not. And if you are, it will just mark you as home in Home Assistant. So if you're using that component, or if you have that device, there's an option for you as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of other apps also are starting to have this functionality. Like my dad got the August smart lock, and you know, again, it does the same kind of thing. Hey, great, you just came home. Let me open that. Now, I'm not sure if August does it using GPS or using Wi-Fi or anything else like that, but or even BLE, but again, there's more apps kind of using that to say, are you here? Are you not? So something to look at as well. I'm not sure how many of those are actually connected into the components page, but you know, it's definitely something to look at. So the Tado is, you know, it should as long as they have an API, it shouldn't be too difficult to pull that information from. But one of the other cool things you can do as well is cars, especially as we start getting more and more connected vehicles.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool if, I don't think this is possible yet, but Google Auto and Apple CarPlay, if they could expose APIs, because they're going into like the lower end cars now. So I think if you've got a BMW or a Tesla, there's components for Home Assistant because they're obviously already connected and all that. But with the new, like the lower end cars, just basically outsourcing their head units to Apple and Google, hopefully they'll take the lead and, you know, maybe expose some APIs in the future for us.
Yeah, and I mean, well, knowing Apple, they probably won't, but probably a better chance of that coming through Google, right?
Yes.
But yes. No, that's absolutely it though, right? And that your vehicle can now be another sensor. So, hey, is my Tesla home? Yeah, great. No, okay. Based on that, then, you know, I'm pulling it out. So instead of, it's neat because it's another metric where instead of using your cell phone, you're now using your car that's still connected to, a mobile network somehow, right? With some kind of backhaul there.
There's also other types of sensors from MySensors. So these are little do-it-yourself sensors that you can create. I believe they have GPS chips that you can use. So once again, you can probably put them over through their MySensors API, find out where you are in the world, and maybe make your own little tracker to put in your backpack or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean same kind of deal, right? The other, this one's a little bit different, where using cameras to detect presence. We've talked about OpenALPR before, which is automatic license plate recognition. So it's similar to technologies that, say, like, for example, I believe a lot of police cars and stuff do this now. I don't know if they're using the OpenALPR engine or not, but basically, as a lot of police cars drive, they can passively scan license plates and see, hey, is this vehicle stolen or is it not? So on and so forth. But essentially, you can use that same thing to say, hey, I have a camera in the garage, and here's a picture of my car in the garage. Read the license plate, and based on that, hey, does it match my license plate number? Yeah, great. That means I'm home.
Yeah, that's a really great one.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then the other thing is, again, face detection, which, again, privacy folks may or may not have a problem with, but there's different Microsoft Face Identity, Facebox, so on and so forth. Have you played with any of these, Phil, by any chance?
Sort of a bit up in the air about whether or not I put cameras in the home. Like
yeah, and I'm exactly that way too, right? And I'm okay with cameras outside the house. Inside the house,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah. I'm just unsure at this stage. I don't have cameras yet. I have motion sensors, so I can see where the motion is, but I can't see so if I'm away, I can't actually see what's actually going on in the home. Yeah. I think I'm also a bit skeptical on how accurate the face detection would be. I know Face ID and all that from Apple now, but still, if I know Facebox is local, how slow is it going to be and all that? I'm unsure on the reliability of it, and I don't necessarily think it's there yet. Maybe I'm just being old and grumpy and don't want to check out this new technology and see how fast it's come. But
yeah,
face detection to me, I'm not sure if it has a place in home automation just yet.
Yeah, I think I'm actually with you on that one. It's to me, it almost crosses that line of boundaries in terms of privacy and that kind of stuff, and it's just you know what, I do think down the road, as this becomes more normal, it'll be like, oh, okay, whatever, it's just face detection. Why are you being paranoid, right? And
yeah, right.
But until that happens, I think I am still a little bit paranoid and just like, you know what? I would still rather use something like motion or something like that over face detection. Now, I mean, that's not to say that motion is the most accurate thing, and face detection might be more accurate if it looks for two eyes and a mouth or something like that, as opposed to a fly flying around or a bee flying around or something, or if you have like a cat or something like that, right? Like. So again, there's pros and cons to both. I'm not 100% sure if face detection is there yet, though, to your point.
So we've covered a few different ways of detecting presence, and now so you've got a whole bunch of ways to detect if you're home or not. But when you add those to Home Assistant, you're going to get a bunch of device trackers, they're called in Home Assistant.
Yeah.
And you want to group them together and make sure, maybe put some advanced rules in place. So Home Assistant has a couple of interesting ways you can do this. Let's assume you have your phone connected to the Wi-Fi, and maybe you've got your nice Tesla Model X that I'm very jealous of sitting in your garage. Using groups, you could combine those two trackers together. So you could have your Tesla and your phone as part of a Home Assistant group. And then you could do your automations based on that group. So, for example, you could have group.fill when either the Tesla or your phone is connected. One of those devices just being marked as home will actually mark that entire group as home. So, therefore, if your phone battery has run out and your Tesla is home, the group will be marked as home, so the presence detection will kick off. So, this is a great way to sort of mitigate some of the risks that are, or the cons that some of their presence detections have. For example, if your Wi-Fi drops out after 10 minutes, but it can see your Bluetooth, then you can sort of, leverage that and get sort of a balancing act.
So is it a or is it an and? So like, is it my, the Tesla and the phone are active, or the Tesla or the phone is active?
It is or. So as long as one device is marked as home, then the group will be marked as home.
Okay.
Which then gets... So what happens if your Tesla's at home, but your phone's away? Does that mean you're at home? Like maybe you've taken public transport to work that day.
Yeah.
So that's where the Bayesian sensor comes in. If you love maths, then you'll love the Bayesian sensor. It deals with probabilities. And so the way it works is you take multiple values from sensors. So in the example, the Tesla, the Wi-Fi, you may use one of those Bluetooth tiles in a bag or something. And then you can tell Home Assistant the probability of how likely it is you are home based on the values of the sensors. So if your Tesla is home, but your phone and the tile aren't home, it's probably more probable that you yourself are not home, even though the Tesla is at home. So then you can build in those rules so the Bayesian sensor can work out, is this person likely to be home? Yes or no. As opposed to just if one device is home, assume the person's home.
Yeah. So this is, you use this today, do you not?
Yeah, so I don't use it for presence yet. I'm still experimenting with it. I've actually set it up as a little monitor to see if there are people in the house. So what I have is I have a few motion sensors added to a Bayesian sensor, and I have the probability rules that as long as 2 motion sensors are detected, then the house is going to assume that there is a person physically in the house.
Okay.
So that's designed, and I'm going to feed that into a security system so that if no device trackers are home, but there's motion in the house, and then someone's either broken a window and they just haven't opened a door to get in and, raise the alarm. And eventually I want to extend the Bayesian sensor so that, if my device tracker is home, then it's 100% I'm probably home. But also other rules, like if I've been home for maybe an extended period of time, maybe I've left my phone at home accidentally. Or, if a GPS signal from my phone, or like my phone logs into the Wi-Fi at my work, then maybe it'll send like an MQTT signal to say I'm at work, and then the Bayesian sensor will work out the probability that, yeah, he's at work because his phone's at work, but his car's still at home, so he's not home anymore, sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get very confusing and lots of different things you can do with a Bayesian sensor. So make sure you've got a good way to map out what you want to achieve and be prepared for a lot of hair pulling.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's that's one of those things where it's like, how deep do I want to get into this, right?
Well, that's it, right? And once you start with home automation, it's basically,
Yeah, you're already
never
into
ends. Yeah.
It's yeah. So okay, so that's interesting. And then how about like, okay, so we keep talking about am I home or am I not home, right? What else?
Yeah.
How can I go further than this? Like in the sense of, hey, you know what? I've been home for a while, or hey, I just got home, or hey, I'm just out, or I've been out for a while, or.
Yeah, so and it's been mentioned a couple of times, a few of our guests on the podcast are using this. On my blog, I have a post called Making Home Assistant's Presence Detection Not So Binary. And I use the Home Assistant, the basically not home or home, and then I do some logic based on how many minutes a device has been home or not home. And I basically created a little series, a workflow, the logic of when someone gets home. So for example, if I'm I'm marked as away in Home Assistant, when I first get home and my device tracker changes or my group changes to home, in the first 5 minutes, I will be set to just arrived. And that allows the home to know, okay, Phil's just got home. Let's start doing some things as if he just got home for the first time. So let's turn on the lights here or start playing some music. Then after 5 minutes, I go into just the normal home state. And that's where it stays. Then once I leave, my device changes from home to just left. And this allows the home to do things like turning off maybe the secondary lights, like all the accent lights, and turning off anything that's not not critical. Then after that 5 minutes, I'll be marked as away, and then Home Assistant can turn off everything, like all the lights, completely shut down the home. And there was actually a reason. The original reason why I did this was because I was finding that when I was sitting at my desk in the office in my previous apartment, that there was just a certain black spot for my Bluetooth. So my phone would be marked as going away from home, and then as soon as I would detect, because I'd be working away on my computer and the PC monitor would just turn off, and I'd be like, I'd wake up my phone and it would connect to Home Assistant, and then everything would kick off again. So the music would start playing, the lights would all come on, and it was as if I had just walked home. So I wanted some rules so that if I was marked as, just leaving home, but I then all of a sudden came back straight away, I don't want it to start kicking off everything from as if I'm coming home for the first time. So I've put some rules in so that, it won't kick off as if I've just come home.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And then finally, if I'm away for more than 24 hours, it will assume that I'm on vacation and will set the house down. Like maybe it'll activate vacation mode where lights will start turning off and on to simulate someone's home. And then when I get home, it will then message say, okay, you've been away for a while. Maybe I'll send you an email with a breakdown of what device batteries the levels are at and what you need to take attention of while you've been away. So that's up on my blog. I'll leave a link in the show note. It doesn't require anything extra in Home Assistant. It's all YAML. You can just drop the automations into your Home Assistant and put the input selects in there as well. And yeah, away you go.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit.
I think, presence detection is not a topic to be taken lightly, and I don't think we've taken it lightly today.
No, exactly. And I think this might actually be one of our longest episodes yet.
Yeah.
But I think it's some really good conversation. And, so what, as kind of takeaways, what Phil and I will do as well is we're going to both post blog posts on our blogs, kind of talk about our personal experiences with it as well.
Yeah. So we'll leave links on how we're using Home Assistant device trackers and what we've found good, what we found bad, and there'll be some code up there if you want to copy and paste as well. So they'll be in the show notes, which are on haspodcast.io.
So if you have an idea for any future episodes, whether it's for the Spotlight episodes or even for our normal Home Assistant podcast episodes, and you want to share your home automation story with us, shoot us an email, feedback@haspodcast.io. or ping us in the podcast channel on the Home Assistant Discord.
And thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.